Well, welcome. Thank you for coming to the virtual Pink Tea today on November the 5th. We're thrilled to have people from coast to coast to coast in Canada tuning in, and we hope you will keep connecting, keep chatting through the program as well. Tell us how you're feeling about things. If you have some ideas and suggestions, just keep talking to one another and building a bond, please. And our thanks to the Tea and Herbal Association of Canada and their wonderful CEO, Shabnan Weber, for contributing the use of their Pink Tea video. And we're hoping to develop a further partnership with the Tea and Herbal Association of Canada. And talking about partnerships, let's just reflect now, please, on our partnership with the First Nations of Canada, each in our own way. I'm in Treaty 8. What treaty land are you on? I'm also in Métis Treaty 3, and you're in Métis Treaty. Yeah. I'm glad to know these things. We didn't know them a few years ago, and I'm so optimistic about the negotiations between our First Nations and the Government of Canada, and Canadians, I guess I should say, because so many more women are leading the discussion, and so many more women are part of the discussion. And that means that we're going to have much fuller discussions and hopefully resolution as well too. So again, thank you very much for making time in your busy days to come today to hear from two remarkable women. I'm thrilled to announce that we have a class of students and professor from the Royal Military College in Kingston, Ontario. So more of their students and more of their professors are women. And as well, our VIP host has invited many of her students to view this, to attend or to view it later. So it will help them too to understand leadership in a time of danger, crisis, chaos, which is what these two women have excelled at, and excelled at it again and again. Today's spokesperson from Enbridge is also someone who has experienced danger, chaos, and crisis. As a 21-year veteran in the Canadian military force, starting life in beautiful Nova Scotia, Daniel Parley then joined the forces and served at some of the bases across Canada, which was a wonderful way to see Canada and know Canada. But then he also was involved, of course, internationally. And part of his deployment was with the UN in areas in Europe and also in Africa, primarily in Rwanda. And so he knows what leadership is like in times of crisis and chaos. Today, however, having traveled the world, Daniel and his family live in a small town just, I think it's west of Edmonton, called Ardrossan. And he works for Enbridge. And because his title is quite specific, I'm going to read it to you. Daniel is the supervisor supporting Canadian and US material procurement requirements for the electrical and maintenance repair and overhaul functions at Enbridge. Wow. So thank you, Daniel, for having that responsibility, and also, of course, for your service. And we thank Enbridge for choosing this veteran to be their spokesperson today, and also for their many years of support for the Famous Five Foundation. And so now, Daniel, it's over to you. Please introduce our wonderful guests and bring your message. Thank you.
Thank you, Frances. It is such a pleasure to be here today on behalf of Enbridge. We've been a proud supporter of the Famous Five Foundation for more than 20 years, as we truly believe in and support the Foundation's vision to champion the development and recognition of Canada's female leaders and the importance of sharing their inspiring and motivating stories. In addition to our support and commitment towards diversity and inclusion, Enbridge is also committed to hiring veterans like myself. Enbridge has a deep appreciation of our military sisters and brothers. They step up and lead and work hard to ensure our safety and the security of so many people around the world. And we know the cost of that service is sometimes the ultimate price. As a 21-year veteran of the Canadian Armed Forces myself, I look forward to hearing from Brigadier-General Krista Brodie. We are eager to hear about your life as a Brigadier General and your civilian role as a Vice President of Logistics and Operations at the Public Health Agency of Canada. Brigadier General Brodie's fascinating personal life includes being married to a surgeon who's also an entrepreneur, and together raising 3 adopted children. Also possessing many talents and a generosity of spirit is today's host, Dr. Jean Slick, currently serving as a program head and associate professor in disaster and emergency management graduate programs at Royal Roads University. Prior to her academic career, Dr. Slick was a leader in developing disaster recovery programs around the world. Her current research is focused on exploring how social media and digital technologies are shaping cultural responses to disasters and the way these types of events are witnessed. There's so much we can tell you about these outstanding women, but let's hear from them directly. Dr. Slick, over to you.
Thank you. It's wonderful to be here today. So thanks to everybody who's joining in on this Pink Tea Day and continuing with the tradition of honoring the work that women have been doing. I first want to begin just by doing a land acknowledgement myself and to say that I'm in the lands of the Lekwungen and Kusotsom people on the west coast of Canada, where I reside and work. So I'm really thrilled today to be here with Brigadier General Krista Brodie. It's really an honor to be here with you, Krista, and to be able to have this conversation. I was thrilled when Francis asked me if I would play this role, and so it's with great enthusiasm that I'm joining you here today. So as we start, we know that you have a long and distinguished career in the military, but I'm wondering if you could just start by talking to us and telling us about your background, your early life before the military.
Sure. So I'll start by saying it's just a tremendous honor to join this group today and to have this conversation. I'm super excited. So although I'm joining you from Ottawa, which is the traditional unceded lands of the Algonquin Anishinaabe people, I was born in Winnipeg and have a deep affinity for both prairie skies and for the West Coast. So my mom's family from just west of Edmonton, she grew up in the Drumheller Valley. My dad from Winnipeg, a deep affinity for big skies, and then we were a bit of a nomadic family. So my dad was a serving member of the military. He and my mom met in Germany in the 60s, where she had followed her sense of adventure to be a D&D school teacher, and so we traveled, crisscrossed the country several times every few years, and so I spent my kind of early formative years on the West Coast several times, and then back and forth across the country. Doing the traverse in a station wagon, fighting with my brother over comic books in the back seat. Spent my high school years in Heidelberg, West Germany. So kind of grew up with a sense of, Canada is a big country, but so too is there a world outside that's bigger than ourselves. So that gives you a bit of a sense of my early life.
Thank you. And so what motivated you to join the military? And at what age did you join?
So I joined the reserves at age 17, and I joined the regular force at 18. So I had joined the reserves the summer before my grade 13 year. We were living in Ontario, in Ottawa at the time. So I joined the Naval Reserves and then joined the regular force at 18. In terms of motivation, I think it was a little mix of a few different things. So growing up in the family that I grew up in, I did have a bit of an overdeveloped sense of wanting to serve society in some productive way. My mom, after her career as a teacher, had a long career with the Canadian Red Cross, and so that that sense of kind of service before self was really ingrained in in our lived experience as a family. So that a bit of that sense of wanting to serve society in a productive way, but not having a really good sense of what I wanted to be when I grew up, and being quite stingy with my money, quite frankly. I didn't necessarily want to spend all of my hard-earned, money that I had kind of accrued working part-time jobs through, throughout high school to vanish in a single, in a single tuition payment. And so when the opportunity came to have my college education paid for through the military, I grabbed at that. I thought, oh, here's a great opportunity to do something productive, to have my education paid for, to get some life experience, and then I can figure out what I want to be when I grow up in in a couple of years from now. And now, over 3 decades later, I think I'm still trying to figure that out.
Well, thank you for connecting those dots between your early life and then moving forward. I've never thought about thinking about how my education would be paid for as a way of thinking about connecting to the military. So I really appreciate that. Also as an educator and having military students in my classes. So now when we think about the military, not everybody's cut out to be in the military. I think it takes a certain kind of character and a certain kind of person to be in that role. I don't know that I could have, been in the role that you were in. So when I think about, we think about people who are in the military have to be able to have the courage to go and work in conflict zones in places like Bosnia or Croatia or Afghanistan. And so how is it that you have found within yourself to have the courage to work and serve in those kinds of really difficult, very difficult conflict places in the world?
So, Jane, I'm not sure that courage really does play that big a part of it in terms of being, a cathartic thing. So it takes a certain amount of courage just to join an organization where you understand that the mandate is to serve under the tenet of unlimited liability, and where you can be ordered into harm's way. But there are many, many ways that people serve and contribute to society that put them in harm's way, and heck, just life itself can be harmful as we navigate our day-to-day lives. But I think one thing we're struggling with now, as we seek to recruit and attract more and more people and more women to the Canadian Forces, is that that there isn't a small cohort of people that have a monopoly on courage, that we can find in each one of us the courage to do something that seems relatively relatively easy. It's not too big a leap of faith to do to do something like join the Canadian Armed Forces, or to join an organization that that is focused on has a mandate to serve. And it's a funny thing, once you make that first step, once you're in, you can find yourself very far down the road of, being in harm's way through a series of very innocuous steps that really didn't take much courage at all. And, and I think about, me, who is deathly afraid of heights, who feels nervous even when I step onto an escalator at the shopping mall, and that first kind of sense where that kind of lurches in your stomach. So how can someone like me end up being like a parachutist, to be a military free fall specialist? And I remember standing at the edge of the ramp of a Hercules aircraft with the horizon line listing, like this, in my full equipment, sweating buckets, and feeling really kind of anxious, and almost like this disembodied sense of, oh my goodness, like, how did I get here? And then there comes a point where, as part of the drill, is you put your goggles down. So you take them off of your helmet and put them over your eyes and kind of press them in to get a good seal. And in that moment where the wind stops in your eyes, and it's like it creates this invisible shield. It's like all of a sudden you're transformed into a superhero, and like you can do anything. And and then the light goes green and you just, you allow yourself to fall out. And when you think of what that means in terms of, a leap of faith, it seems like a big thing, but really, it was no great act of courage. It was a series of very innocuous steps that, one after the other, due to training and fine tuning, becomes just part of what you do, part of who we are as people. So sometimes it doesn't take a particular singular act of courage. Sometimes it's just a commitment to keep taking one step after another.
Well, it certainly sounds from your experience and example there that, training is a key part of it. And then also, I think just being prepared, obviously, to go into the situations that you're in. Even when you were standing on that plane and the horizon was wobbling, you were obviously prepared to take that step. And I commend you for that. I'm also afraid of heights, so I can't even imagine, overcoming that.
Sometimes preparation is everything.
Yeah, so I guess it's really that kind of training and preparation then, and then being in those situations, being in a conflict situation, you are not feeling overwhelmed then necessarily in that space.
Rarely, I would say. Like, there are certainly moments where where you feel overwhelmed, but I think in general, when you feel like you are part of a team, when you feel like the people around you, are there to support you, and that you all have a sense of common, purpose and vision, and you're working together towards something that's bigger than yourself, then it's very rare that you do, feel overwhelmed. And when you do, you can kind of take a deep breath and look around and think, okay, I've got the sky above and the ground below, even if the horizon line's going a little bit crazy now, I'm right where I'm supposed to be with people who are supposed to be here with me.
Yeah. Wow. Thank you. Now, you've had a chance to serve in Afghanistan, and we've been watching what's been happening there over the last, years, but also the last few months in particular, and lots of tragedy. Could you just share your thoughts about the current situation in Afghanistan?
Sure. So I do think that it is a tragedy, really, of tremendous proportion, internationally, nationally, at the local level. The people that have been impacted by the conflict, by the Taliban rising to power again so quickly in the last weeks and months. The impact of that has been absolutely devastating, particularly to the people on the ground, to those who, over the last 2 decades, so tenuously held on to, to some sense of stability while they tried to create opportunities and build a society that was, much more open and provided much more opportunity. And when we think about, the Canadian families that are impacted, there is a significant amount of, of Canadian blood spilt on Afghan soil, and the impact of that on, on the families is tremendous, because nobody wants to think that, that their sacrifices or the sacrifices of their loved ones have been in vain. And I think, our hold on security there was always tenuous, but the people were always worthy of our efforts. And so, so to face this kind of a development at this particular time, it's super difficult. It's okay for it to feel like our hearts are breaking a little bit about this, because honestly, our hearts are breaking a lot.
Yes, and there's so much work being done too, so many efforts, grassroots efforts as well, to support people who've served over there, and people who were interpreters, et cetera. So, well, thank you.
I really think it does speak to the strength of, the strength of Canadians and those grassroots community initiatives that really, I think, demonstrate the, the strength of the fabric of, of Canadian society, and what it means in terms of who we want to be in the world as, as a nation and as a people, and how we want to live out that, that identity in, in the world and in a global setting. So I do find it very inspiring that there has been so much grassroots supports for the Afghan people, for families, for for reunification, and for providing that on the ground support in in many different ways.
Thank you for your insights. So I want to switch topics a little bit here and think a bit about the person's case and the famous five, and so women having to fight and overcome to be recognized as persons. So you're a woman serving in the Canadian military. You have a very distinguished career. We've all, as women, had to face barriers in our personal lives and our work lives, but I think I'm really curious about the space of working as a woman in the Canadian military. So I did a little research to find some stats, because that's what I do as a professor. So what I found was that the number of women in the military increased from 1.4% in 1965 to just over 15.8% in 2020, but that only 4% serve in combat arms roles. So I'm thinking that for you as a woman in the military, there must have been many sort of firsts or challenges in working in what we would consider to be a male-dominated culture and sexist environment. What's it been like for you, and how have you survived and thrived in that environment?
Well, I joined the Canadian Armed Forces, the regular force, in 1989. And that was a bit of a banner year, because that was the year that all of the combat arms occupations opened to women. So although I didn't serve in a combat arms occupation, I was a combat service support, so a logistician in the Army. I did have an opportunity to serve in combat arms units. So one of my first postings was as the quartermaster of the 3rd Battalion of the Princess Patricia's Canadian Light Infantry, so an airborne unit. And I would say that kind of my experience there was accumulation of firsts, in that, that I was provided unprecedented opportunities, but it was not easy to make those opportunities, real, or to be able to kind of, fight my way through what was very much a male-dominated, in many cases, a sexist, misogynistic environment. So I would say, how did I navigate that? Probably with a healthy dose of tenacity and perseverance. In those early years, there were a lot of nights that I probably went home and sat on my couch, physically and emotionally exhausted, and ate a box of old Dutch potato chips as my supper before I fell asleep. I think, there are times where, when you're in the moment, you're just kind of fighting your way through the moment on a day-to-day basis, and you get, at the end of the week, you think, okay, I survived another week. I'm doing great. I'm doing all right. And then you kind of reflect back and realize that, surviving to fight another day sometimes in those situations is really no small victory, because you do it quite often without the support of a community around you that, that connects you to other women that are going through the same situation. So you're very isolated. And then as you grow up through the organization, you realize that there really is an opportunity to do that better, to create opportunities, to connect people, and and create communities that allow people to know that that they aren't alone, and that there are other support mechanisms out there that help kind of build not only the dimensions of character that we aspire to, but that just the competencies, so that people feel, and particularly women, feel confident in those, in those roles, and like they're both a valuable and contributing member of the team, but perhaps more importantly, that they're actually valued as a contributing member of the team. So it's been a bit of an evolution, quite frankly. There was a time where I thought, there were no glass ceilings. I was, I was coming of age in an equal opportunity Army. There were other times where it was very clear I was running up against, very very, very thick glass ceilings. There was a time where I thought I was rocking it. I was on the top of the world. I was commanding a battalion. I had 1,400 soldiers. We were doing really neat work, and I could tell the story of having, smashed through the glass ceiling from the top down using parachuting anecdotes, and then I think what I've come to realize, quite late in my career, that it's often at the very most senior levels where those barriers really need to be deliberately dismantled, and where we need to be reaching way down in our organizations to deliberately dismantle barriers, create those opportunities, for people to grow and develop, particularly women, women from racialized, marginalized communities, so that we can pull them up and allow them to really serve to their greatest potential. Just think, how powerful our organizations could be, if everybody within them felt like they were contributing to their full potential.
So does the military have targets? So is there a goal that they're looking for in terms of the number of women who are in the forces?
So we do have a goal. So Strong, Secure, and Engaged, the defense policy that was published the summer of 2017, sets a goal of 25.1% women by the year 2026. So what I'll tell you now, so in my current capacity as the commander of military personnel generation, so I look after all of the strategic intake requirements, recruiting and training, is that there is no way forward to achieving that goal if we maintain the current way of doing business. So right now, our organization, our structures, but more than that, our culture does not allow us to truly welcome women into the full range of occupations that we need them to come into in order to achieve those numbers. So, the largest part of our kind of available job postings are in those combat arms trades and those operational occupations in the Air Force and in the Navy and in the Army, where we typically have a very difficult time kind of attracting women, either because they don't know about them or because they can't see themselves in succeeding in those roles. And so we have a real challenge ahead of us in that regard as well, both in terms of kind of our practical attractions campaigns, as well as in the lived experience, and ensuring that what it kind of looks and feels like to live in the CAF on any given day, really reflects our core values and our ethical principles.
Well, thank you. We hear lots of reports in the media about challenges for women in the military, so I appreciate really hearing your firsthand perspective and what that's been like, and really commend you for the achievements that you've made. And one just sort of follow-on question: do you have faith in the ability of the military to change? I assume you do because you're part of it, but
I do. So so I'll offer a couple of thoughts. So first off, I think that it needs to be acknowledged right up front that when we as individuals and as an institution, allow our behaviors, our attitudes, our beliefs to stray from those better values of the profession of arms, so those core Canadian values and ethical principles that we uphold, then we cause harm. And that there has been harm caused to many, many people within the organization: men, women, non-binary, gender non-conforming, LGBTQ2+, the two-spirited community, racialized communities. So there has been harm. But I think so too can there be acknowledgement and healing, and in that a hope for reconciliation, so that it is clear that we are in a time of reckoning, and we need this reckoning, something fierce. But so too can there be reconciliation. And we see this not only in the Canadian Forces, but within our academic institutions, within industry, within corporate communities, across business, really across society. But there is a real role for the Canadian Armed Forces as a national institution to be a real leader in this space. And when we look at how we as a society align our lived experience and our day-to-day kind of how we live and how we lead with our values, there's a real opportunity for us to kind of to lead forward in that space and find a new way. And I think, and nowhere is there an organization that is holding itself so publicly to account for for making those changes, and in a way that I think is accessible to the Canadian population, writ large. So there is, we're legislated to be an equal opportunity employer and to treat every person with dignity and respect. And so if we can demonstrate that in ways that are very tangible, then that can be, I think, a real force for good in society writ large, because it as we share our best practices across communities, we're actually creating momentum and and a movement that I think can be a real positive force for good. So I do have hope, and quite frankly, that's why I can't leave at this point in time. I don't want my my over 30 years of experience kind of growing up the hard way in the Canadian Armed Forces to to be in vain, to not have that opportunity to influence at this point in time.
Thank you for that. And it's a lovely tie again back to this notion of women as persons, right? Just being recognized as persons. We're going to make a switch now and have some questions presented to you by two young women. And so we're going to pass this over now. And the first one is Simran. So she's got a question for you.
Hi, I'm Simran Sandhu, a third-year University of Calgary student. Thank you, Brigadier-General Brodie, for your service and commitment to democracy on behalf of all the women around the world. Everyone gets stressed at some point, me too. So I'm wondering, how are you able to overcome stressful aspects and challenges in your respective jobs? Thank you. Shukriya.
Thank you for that very thoughtful question. So the first thing I would say in facing stressful situations is take a deep breath. Take a deep breath and just try to settle yourself. And then when we think about how we bring order to chaos in those moments, because so often, that's what those stressful situations are representing, a moment of crisis or a moment of chaos, it's helpful to have a model, so a mental model or a framework that you can apply to help discipline your thoughts and kind of harness that bias to action, to actually do something that helps you move beyond that stressful moment in a way that feels productive. So in the military, we have a great frame of reference that we call the operational planning process. But in basic terms, what it means is that we take a moment to do a mission analysis, to understand the nature of the problem, to think and reflect on what the problem is that we're trying to solve, or what the question is that we're trying to answer. And then we develop options that allow us to consider what all of the possibilities are. And we seek advice or guidance if there's an opportunity to do that. We make a decision, and that's critical when you're in a stressful situation and something needs to happen. You actually have to make a decision. Now, ideally, you want it to be the best informed decision, the best possible decision with the information that you have, but you must make a decision, and sometimes without delay. And then once you've made that decision, develop a plan. implement it, and then adjust the plan as you go along if things start to go off the rails or the circumstances or situation changes. But in having considered what your options were up front, you'll have a very good grasp on what all of the potential options are to pull into your plan once you start rolling it out and things start to change on the fly. So take a deep breath and then have a framework, have a mental model that allows you to take a disciplined approach to taking action and making a decision.
Thank you. And we now have a second young woman, Mira, who's got another question for you.
Hi, I'm Mira Kalar, a grade 10 student at Western Canada High School. How have your past professional or personal experiences and difficulties helped to shape you as a person? Thank you.
Thank you. So I think all of our experiences shape us in one way or the other. So if you think of all of your personal life experiences and all of your professional experiences, your school experiences, your work experiences, like they're the warp and weft of a tapestry that binds you as a person, kind of makes you the fabric of, makes up the fabric of who you are as a person. Every single one of those circumstances, whether they're positive or negative or somewhere in between, really becomes a part of who you are and, and how you see the world. And I think, and sometimes it speaks to, how we respond in the world too. So, so when I joined the Canadian Armed Forces, it was because I had this, the sense of adventure, the sense of wanting to serve society in some productive way, of wanting to be part of an organization that, that would look after me. But you have no real sense of where that's going to take you or what it's going to make you as a person. And then, to look back on it and reflect on that now over 3 decades later, and to appreciate the, the life trajectory that, has, as a family, arrived us, at this point where, we have 3 amazing adopted children, but we have many members, extended members of our family that have, connected to us by virtue of connecting, connecting on overseas deployments. We have, a couple of families who are, just wonderful extended members of our families that I met in a refugee camp when I was serving off the coast of Croatia. We billet a hockey player from from a community outside of our own. We've had the children of friends of ours kind of live with us at various points in in our lives, and and then in November of last year I'd fallen asleep on the top bunk of our little guy's bunk bed reading bedtime stories, and my phone rang in the middle of the night, and it was it was the call tasking me over to the public health agency to support the vaccine distribution rollout. And so then you think in those moments, all of these things kind of come together in ways we can barely imagine, but our experiences do shape us, whether they and whether they're making us better people, whether they're making us better leaders. They are making us more resilient, and they're kind of making us the people that we need to do and that we need to be in those moments where we receive the call in the middle of the night. And when I think about that now, I think quite honestly, like that was the call that I've been waiting my whole life to receive, in terms of when we step up, like when it's our turn to step up and serve in a way that is truly impactful. And so I would never have imagined, as a teenager, kind of going off to military college with, a certain sense of trepidation, that, that there would come a moment where I would be able to step into a role like that and, and really, be part of a team that was having, such impactful, such an impactful role, for not just the Canadian Armed Forces, but for Canada and for Canadians. So, yeah, so really, like, life experiences are everything. So take every opportunity to seize whatever opportunity is, is presented to you, because you never know, quite honestly, where it'll lead.
And it's interesting to hear the circle in that story, because when we started, we talked about your background and what that was like and how those life experiences informed you. And I'm just imagining now those 3 children of yours are being enriched as well by the experiences that you and your husband are providing for them, and the extended family, and the connections that you've made. So yeah.
So sometimes perspective is everything. So our 13-year-old was very bitter that, that the government stole her mom for, for the better part of, 9 months, while I was so consumed by that particular operation. But I think perspective is, is everything, and that'll change and mature over time, one hopes.
So now you've become a brigadier general. There are, in the history of Canadian forces, the stats tell me that only 33 women have risen to general or flag officer rank. So how did you come to achieve this rank in the military?
Honestly, Jean, the hard way. And many days it feels like it came one very hard day at a time, working twice as hard for half the recognition, or for no recognition at all. Fighting to build my credibility, within an Army community where I didn't always feel like I belonged, and where I had some bosses that were better than others and some that were downright horrible, but honestly learned from all of those experiences and through all of those experiences. And there comes a time where you need champions, where there needs to be someone that reaches down and pulls you up, or creates an opportunity for you to step in and compete, with your peers, for a truly equal opportunity at some of those gateway positions that allow you to kind of move through the stations of the cross. And in the Army, there are many, many stations of the cross, and and I feel like I had to do all of them, and often kind of better than many of my male counterparts and peers, just to be taken seriously and to be considered to be competitive in that cohort. So so that's a lesson in how we could do things better, and how organizations like the Famous Five are so important in terms of how we support women and create opportunities, and create those spaces where where women can then truly shine in their own merits and in their own rights, and be able to develop the confidence to know that they belong, that they contribute in a meaningful and valuable and valued way. The hard way. I think we are in a system that that's evolving, that continues to evolve, that's becoming more and more transparent about its selection criteria, and that is incorporating the the dimensions of character as well as competencies in very measurable ways, so that it so we continue to become more and more sophisticated, and in terms of of how we build our leadership development, and how we do our leader selection. But honestly, how did I get here? The hard way.
Well, I, for one, certainly, and I think we all do, appreciate the sacrifices you've made, but I think we're also so inspired that you're in the leadership position that you are today. So when you think about your career in the military, did you aspire to get to be a brigadier general, or to be in a leadership role? You joined a long time ago, so what were your aspirations, and was this ever a dream?
So I don't think I had specific aspirations about a particular rank, and and to be honest, right off the bat, I just wanted to get a degree. I wanted to get my 5 years worth of work experience, and then see what I could do with that. But but in the process, it really became for me a calling, a sense of vocational calling, that sense of wanting to belong to the profession of arms, because I truly felt like it was a good fit for me. That although I didn't look like the archetypal warrior prince, that the organization was better with me in it, and that I had something valuable to contribute. And so it wasn't so much about kind of wanting to be a particular rank, but I definitely wanted to be a leader. Like I was a really good bossy girl. I like to organize people, and I always thought I had a good sense of how things could be better, or I was a good problem solver. One of my superpowers is seeing through wicked complex problems and being able to distill that to its essential elements, and then being able to do something about it that seems to make it better. So I like to think of myself as like a kind, bossy girl that was well suited to leadership, and then landed in an organization that actually cultivated leadership in a way that that felt empowering, and and felt like I could continue to contribute. But it was really about influence. There came a point in time where I thought, holy smokes, it shouldn't be this hard. It shouldn't have to be like this. And so how now do I find myself with enough influence to actually make real change? And in a hierarchical organization like the Canadian Armed Forces, and like many companies, there's only so much you can do as a horizontal influencer amongst your peer group. There really does come a time where positional authority and matters in terms of creating the policy and leveraging authorities to make real change. And so I thought that as at every rank level, I thought I had a lot of influence. But what I've come to realize that once you break into the general officer ranks, your accessibility to kind of the very most senior decision makers, like you're that much closer to the center in terms of decision making, and therefore the influence sphere of that takes on a whole new dimension. And so so I think I jokingly said earlier, like I can't leave now because I finally I feel like I've arrived at the point where I could be a bit of a force for good in this culture change space that we're cultivating, because I understand what it's like to be from the inside, but I also bring a bit of an outsider's perspective to that by virtue of having lived that experience as a woman, and then having had an opportunity to step outside of the uniformed military experience for a couple of years while I was I went on an academic sabbatical down to the States, and actually studied toxic leadership and organizational culture change in large complex organizations. And so I bring a bit of a different perspective back into the organization at a time where we are facing a real crisis, a crisis in culture, and a real reckoning with sexual misconduct and with professional misconduct in many, many dimensions. So yeah, influence, it's really important, and how we leverage that at all levels and through communities of communities, and not just our hierarchical institutions, is really important.
Thank you, and welcome, Frances.
Well, I'm thrilled to be included in this absolutely riveting conversation. I sort of didn't want to join because the two of you were really inspiring and moving me, and I'm sure many of the other viewers. When people registered, they sent in some questions, but the Brigadier General's answers have covered those questions as to how did she become the VP at the Public Health Agency, and what type of leadership she is interested in. So I would like to go to our lightning round of questions, if we may please, and for both Jean and Krista. And I apologize, Jean. I should have said to Krista, you should ask some questions of Jean too, because Jean has an amazing history, a legacy of contribution and of being a leader in very difficult situations. So maybe this will give us a little bit of information about you too, Jean, as well as being a skillful interviewer. So the first question is, and I'm just going to make a statement and I'll ask you to give us an answer in 1 or 2 words. When I'm confused, and Krista, we'll start with you.
Question.
Question. Okay. Jean, when you're confused, you?
Stop and think.
Thank you. When I'm scared, not that either of you have been scared, but Brigadier General?
I'm scared all the time. I breathe, or try to remember to breathe.
You're scared all the time. What makes
Honestly.
you scared all the time? But you've got achievements. You've got experience, Brigadier.
I know, but all of those things don't, they are not an antidote for, for regular human emotions and reactions. So I think that it's okay to be, to be afraid, to be scared. What's not okay is to be frozen or paralyzed by that. So really it's about,
being aware.
Finding your breath and stepping into that fear.
Thank you. Jean, when I am scared,
I take a deep breath and feel my feet on the ground.
Thank you. The third one is when I am sad, Vice President.
Reflect.
Reflect. Thank you. And Jean, what do you do?
I would say go outdoors. I usually smile when I'm outside.
It does make a difference, doesn't it? And so the last question for the two of you is, if the famous 5, and thank you very much for mentioning them as part of your discussion, keeping them current. If the famous 5 were alive today, they would ... What do you think they would do? Brigadier General?
Oh, they would join the Canadian Armed Forces and they would help us lead our nation forward.
Yay. Well, I see you're only 2 steps away. The next promotion is to Major General, then it's to Lieutenant General, and then it's to General. So I think if you would breathe in the famous 5, that they would give you the extra. Maybe I should tell this to the people around that are making the decisions, how best to promote you. Anyway, I digress. Jean, if the famous 5 were alive today, they would.
Well, I'm going to give 2 answers. My first one is they would still be having pink teas because that's having places where you can have these conversations. But the second thing they'd be doing is they'd be like multiplying like Krista within the Canadian military.
Yeah. Yes, excellent answers. Thank you very much. I'm so eager now to begin the toast, the thank you to the two of you, because you both have been truly extraordinary. And so I'm hoping my buddies out there in digital land, in virtual land, have your cup of tea, you have your teacup, or you have a glass of water, and we'd like to toast. And our first toast, of course, goes to the Brigadier-General Krista and the Vice President Brodie. So when we heard you speak in Calgary 2 years ago, Krista, we were all enthralled and we all said, wow, now that's a leader and she has to get to the top in Canada because she will make us such a better country. Each of us, in talking about what we remember from 2 years ago, had different memories of how you touched us, and you touched us several times today too. And I think that will happen, that people will say, yeah, I took that away, or I really appreciated her saying that. You give us great optimism for the future, and that's very powerful. So we're very grateful that you are a Brigadier General and that you've taken on this extra responsibility. And I guess our apologies to your 13-year-old that this big project took away her mom. but hopefully she realizes the incredible contribution that you've made because you've stepped up. And so if we may raise our glasses of tea, our glass of tea in toast to Brigadier General and Vice President Krista Brodie. To Krista. As I was saying, your future is very bright, and please know that we are cheering for you, and we are here to support you too, Krista. You are not alone. Just a phone call or an email away from many, many women in Canada is there to support you. So please continue, and thank you for what you are doing. And today's fascinating pink tea was led so skillfully by Professor Jean Slick. And when Jean and I just met, which we did about a month ago, I just marveled at all the places she's been where there has been a natural disaster and how she managed to bring order out of it. She managed to bring civility out of it. And now the lucky students at Royal Roads are learning how to follow in her footsteps, but obviously down their own paths. So Jean, thank you very much for leading us through this fantastic conversation with Brigadier General Krista Brodie. And so we say thanks to you and we toast you, Dr. Jean Slick. Thank you. And thank you, Krista. And we would like to also toast, of course, to Daniel Parley, to Enbridge, to the two girls that got us thinking. So to Mira and to Simran, to Daniel and to Enbridge, if we might have a toast of thanks. And as Remembrance Day is just around the corner, we want to add a toast, and this time it is to all the people who have served in the military, who continue to serve in the military, with special recognition for their families and for the incredible leaders that are making our military much more effective and much more, I don't know, Krista, quite what the word is, compassionate, eclectic, to make it the best military that it can be. So to our military champions and their families, thank you. So now I'm going to ask our talented AV folks to let Krista and Jean relax while I bring you just a couple of pieces of Famous Five news. So October 18th, as you all know, is Persons Day. And last week or 2 weeks ago, it was the 92nd anniversary of the Persons case, a legal decision that defined the word persons as always meaning women and men, men and women. And this was throughout the British Empire, and it was adopted by other countries too, that that's what that word would mean. And in Canada, it meant women could serve in the Senate. And right now, our Senate is gender balanced. First time. How exciting. But in Alberta, we held a municipal and a school board election on October 18th. And I guess the message got through that this was Persons Day, because Edmonton elected their first ever female majority council. 8 of their 15 councillors are female. And then as we travel to the southeast of the province, to Medicine Hat, where probably Krista has been, they too they made history. They elected a female majority city council. And they also elected their first female mayor. She got 66% of the vote. Lindsay Clark is her name. And she has 5 female colleagues on the council. Here in Calgary, we elected our first female mayor. This is 2021. Edmonton has had a female mayor since 1989, but we got our first one, and her name is Jyoti Gondek. And Jyoti is joined by 4 very, very, very capable female councillors. So these are all new Famous Five groups that are coming to build Canada. And of course, another breakthrough happened in Manitoba when 2 women competed to become the leader of the Manitoba Progressive Conservative Party and the leader, and then on to be the premier of Manitoba. It's not quite decided, but Heather Stephenson has been sworn in as the premier of Manitoba, the very first female premier in Manitoba. Before Heather got sworn in, there was only one other female premier in Canada, and that was the premier of the Northwest Territories, Caroline Cochrane. So we're hoping on January the 14th, that will be our first virtual Pink Tea of the 2022 season, and we hope you will all join us, that we will feature some of these premiers or former premiers. So brava to all the women who ran and all the people who helped them. And the wonderful groups that have prepared women to be political leaders, such as Equal Voice and Ask Her YYC. And talking about elections and our freedom to vote, to choose our government, as both Krista and Jean discussed earlier, Afghanistan is now struggling. Our next Famous Five virtual Pink Tea will be December 3rd, and we will highlight two remarkable women who for years have been bringing freedom to women and girls in Afghanistan, because they believe, as many others do, that education equals peace, that education and the ability to think produces prosperity, produces health. And so the Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan over the last 20 plus years have educated hundreds of teachers and tens of thousands of students. And we will have the incredible Executive Director of Canadian Women for Women in Afghanistan, Dr. Lauren Oates, and Mararid Saeed, who is the Senior Director for Afghanistan, joining us on December the 3rd. So do come. And this is our call to action for you this month. Write, email, phone MPs and the Prime Minister to say that every Afghani that has helped Canadians in Afghanistan, if they want to come to Canada, bring them to Canada. These will be outstanding citizens. And you can say you heard it from Brigadier-General Krista Brodie. She earlier suggested too that these were outstanding people that helped us, and now they want to come to Canada, so we have to support the government in bringing more of them to Canada. And now our last toast is to each and every one of us, because we are leaders, not to ourselves all the time, then to many others. So I would like you to raise your cup and to say in a strong, clear voice, to me, I'm a leader too. Are you ready? To me, I'm a leader too. So now you have a choice. I hope you will stay connected with this Zoom and send your thanks and your ideas to our wonderful program participants. Our thanks to Brigadier-General Krista Brodie. Our thanks to Dr. Jean Slick. But you may have received, you probably have received an email just shortly that says, please click on this link and it will take you to an après Pink Tea, where both our Vice President of Operations at the Public Health Agency and Dr. Jean Slick will be there to chat with you and to receive your congratulations. So thank you for coming today. Merci, miigwech, a bientôt. See you on December the 3rd. Thank you. Bye-bye.